So, dear students, today we will be learning the German present perfect, called perfect in German. Gonzalo, you will never learn the German perfect if you always just think about football. Boludo, I can already use the German present perfect. Please show me. Show me. Ich habe Fußball gespielt. Okay. Ich bin ins Stadion gegangen. Ja, okay. Lionel Messi ist Fußball-Weltmeister geworden. Okay. Even a blind squirrel finds a nut sometimes. If you don't want to find nuts, but rather learn the important German present perfect with helpful examples, clear explanations, and practical exercises, then you've come to the right spot. Welcome to the German Lounge, the Deutsch-Lounge. I'm your linguistics expert, Juan Carlos Dielmann, and I'll be explaining to you the function of the present perfect, how to form this past tense, also what regular and irregular verb forms look like, and last but not least, how to use separable and inseparable verbs in the present perfect. So stay tuned.
Let's get started. What is the function of the present perfect in German? The present perfect expresses an action in the past that still has a connection to the present. Just like in this example, Dennis ist vom Skateboard gefallen, which is Dennis has fallen off the skateboard. What is the connection to the present? He's still lying on the ground, he's feeling a lot of pain, and probably he will feel pain for the next hours. But in spoken language, the present perfect is also used for completed actions without a connection to the present, especially in Germany and Austria. So in Germany, an old man could say, 1966 habe ich ein Beatles-Konzert besucht. In English, you would use a simple past in this sentence. In 1966, I went to a Beatles concert. But please remember, the verbs haben, sein, and modal verbs, for example, können or müssen, are mostly used in the Präteritum tense, also in spoken language. Okay, how do we form the present perfect in German? Let's have a look at a few examples. Listen to the sentences and read silently along. Ronny hat den ganzen Tag Deutsch gelernt. Auf der Party haben wir uns lange unterhalten. Alessia und Marco sind nach Italien gereist. Harumi ist schon um 5:30 aufgewacht. Warum ist Anna heute zu Hause geblieben? So, how do we form the present perfect? Have a look at the sentences. Which verb forms do we need? We need an auxiliary verb, which is haben or sein, and the past participle. But when do we use haben or sein as an auxiliary verb? With the help of our 5 sentences that we had before, we can formulate 5 rules. Rule number 1. Haben is used for most verbs in German, including all verbs with accusative object and, by the way, also modal verbs. Rule number 2, we also use haben with reflexive verbs, just like sich unterhalten, which means to have a conversation. Rule number 3, we use sein with verbs of motion, just like gehen, kommen, or fahren. Rule number 4, We also use sein with verbs of change of state or verbs of transition, just like aufwachen, wake up, einschlafen, to fall asleep, werden, to become, or sterben, which means to die. All those verbs describe a transition. So, for example, the transition of aufwachen is that in the beginning, I'm sleeping, and after the transition, I'm awake. Rule number 5. We also use sein when we form the present perfect of the verbs sein, which means to be, or bleiben, which means to stay. For example, Anna ist hier gewesen, which means Anna has been here, or also Anna was here. So please remember these 5 rules. Let's have a closer look at regular and irregular verbs. Both are used with the auxiliary haben or sein. The difference is the past participle. Okay, so what are the endings of the past participle? Please have a look at those participles. Do you see the difference? We have 2 different endings. We have the t, like in gelernt, and we have the n, just like in unterhalten. And you will be learning now that the regular ending is the t, and the irregular ending is the n. So, how do we form the past participle of regular and irregular verbs? This is the pattern for regular verbs. Let's take a regular verb like machen, which means to do or to make. Okay, how do we form the participle now? First of all, we cancel the infinitive ending. And what do we get? We get mach. Then we put the g in front, but that's not enough. We also need an ending. And for regular verbs, it's the t. So, gemacht is the past participle of machen. So now you try to form the past participle for the regular verbs lernen, which means to learn or to study, kaufen, which means to buy, and arbeiten, which means to work. Lernen. What is the past participle? Gelernt. Kaufen. Gekauft. Arbeiten. Gearbeitet. Here we have to put an extra because arbeit with double T would look weird and would sound weird. So we say gearbeitet. Okay, let's have a look at the irregular verbs now. The pattern is quite similar, but of course the ending is different. Let's take an irregular verb like lesen, which means to read. Okay, what do? We cancel the infinitive ending and we get les. We put the g in front, just like with regular verbs, but now we need the ending n. So the past participle of lesen is gelesen. And now you do the same with the irregular verbs tragen, which means to carry, kommen, which means to come, and singen, which means to sing. So, tragen. What is the past participle? Getragen. Kommen. Gekommen. Singen. Oh, it's not gesingen, it's gesungen. So it's totally irregular. But it looks like the English to sing, sang, sung. Gesungen is like the English sung. Many verbs just have, let's say, a regular verb root, like les, trag, komm. They get the g in the beginning and the ending n. But of course, we also have a lot of verbs that are even irregular concerning the verb root. But that's not all. We have regular verbs, we have irregular verbs, and we also have mixed verbs. What does that mean? This is the pattern for the mixed verbs. The beginning is just the same. We have g. The ending is the regular ending, but you will see that in the middle, the verb root will always be very irregular. Let's have a look. Let's take wissen, which means to know. So how does it work? We cancel the infinitive ending. And now we should get wiss, but we don't. We get the verb root wuss, which is really irregular. But now it's easy. We put the g in front. We need the regular t in the end. And here it is, the past participle of wissen, gewusst. In English, it would be known. Now you try to form the past participle of bringen, which means to bring, rennen, which means to run, and denken, which means to think. But now it's unpredictable because remember, the verb root will not be regular. So it's not gebringt, it's not gerennt, and it's not gedenkt. Let's see if you know it. So, bringen, gebracht. Rennen, gerannt. Denken, gedacht. So, in general, you just have to learn the past participle of the present perfect in German because you never know whether the verb is regular or irregular or even a mixed verb. Just learn it. How do you learn it? Of course, when you learn a new word, learn the past forms by heart. But you also will learn the past and grammar and vocabulary in general by reading, by listening to the radio, for example, or just by speaking a lot with native speakers, because then you will be hearing verb forms and other stuff every time that you speak with someone. Okay, this is an important overview for you. And just one tip. If you have to use a verb and you don't know whether it's regular or not, just treat it as if it was regular. And even if you make a mistake, even if you said, for example, ich habe dir etwas zu essen gebringt, it's maybe funny, but the other person will understand you. So don't be afraid of making mistakes. It's just normal when you learn a language. Regular and irregular verbs. I have said before that both regular and irregular verbs need the auxiliary haben or sein. So it's not a question of regular or irregular whether you have to use haben or sein. This is the overview again, and now we are going to practice a little bit. The task is form sentences using haben or sein. Example, ich Kaffee machen. Of course, this is not a sentence, but please form a sentence with those words. What could it be? The solution is, ich habe Kaffee gemacht. Now it's your turn. Okay, the solution is, du hast deutsche Grammatik gelernt. Now gekauft. The solution is, Enric hat Fußballschuhe gekauft. Gearbeitet. What's correct? Benedetta hat am Samstag gearbeitet. Okay, let's practice with irregular verbs now. Gelesen. Please form the sentence. The solution is, wir haben ein deutsches Buch gelesen. Getragen. What's correct? Ihr habt eine schwere Tasche getragen. And now, gekommen. What's the solution? Arden und Salmo sind spät nach Hause gekommen. Why do we use sein as an auxiliary verb now? Remember, kommen is a verb of motion. Gesungen. What's correct? Jane hat in einer Karaoke-Bar gesungen. Now let's practice with mixed verbs. Gewusst. Let's see if you know it. Jamie hat fast alles gewusst. Gebracht. What's correct? Manning und Dana haben Getränke gebracht. Gerannt. What's the solution? Zihei und Zuchang sind aus der Schule gerannt. And last but not least, gedacht. What's correct? Juan David hat oft an sein Konzert gedacht. So you have seen that we had to use haben or sein with both regular verbs and irregular verbs. And yes, also mixed verbs. Now, the separable and inseparable verbs are an important part of German grammar. And we have to pay attention to it when we form the present perfect. Okay, let's have a look at 3 examples. Listen to the sentences and read silently along. Kaufen. Ning hat ein Flugticket gekauft. Einkaufen. Ning hat im Supermarkt eingekauft. Verkaufen. Ning hat ihr Auto verkauft. Which verb is separable and which one is inseparable? Einkaufen is separable and verkaufen is inseparable. Separable means that when I conjugate it, for example, in the present, I don't say ich einkaufe. I have to say ich kaufe ein. So the prefix ein is separated, whereas verkaufen doesn't work like this. I just say ich verkaufe, I sell. So it's inseparable. Ver is an inseparable prefix. And you can even hear it. When a prefix is separable, it has the word stress of the verb. So it's einkaufen. It's not einkaufen. But verkaufen, the word stress is on kauf. It's never on the inseparable prefix. So phonetics is very helpful for grammar in this case. How do we form the past participle of separable verbs and inseparable verbs? Please have a look at the past participle. What's the difference? Here we can see the 3 patterns for the past participle. Kaufen is just ge plus kauf plus t. Einkaufen is the prefix ein plus ge plus kauf plus t. And verkaufen is the prefix ver without ge plus kauf plus t. So what does that mean for all the other verbs in German? We have 3 different patterns for the past participle. If we have a simple verb like kaufen, we form the past participle like this. Ge plus verb root and then plus t if it's a regular or mixed verb, or n if it's an irregular verb. For all separable verbs, just like einkaufen, the pattern is the separable prefix plus ge plus verb root, and then plus t or n. And the pattern for inseparable verbs, just like verkaufen, we have the inseparable prefix plus verb root plus t or n. Now let's practice this. Put the following sentences in the present perfect. Use the appropriate pattern for forming the past participle. Let's go. Let's start with an example. Eva versteht gut Deutsch. This is a sentence in the present. Now we form the sentence in the present perfect. Eva hat gut Deutsch verstanden. Why is it verstanden? Verstehen is an inseparable verb. So the prefix ver is inseparable. After that, we have the verb root stand and just the irregular ending n. This is how it works. Next sentence. It's your turn now. Die Studentin schreibt eine Prüfung in present perfect. Okay, let's see. Die Studentin hat eine Prüfung geschrieben. So it's a simple verb, schreiben. We put ge, and the verb root schrieb is irregular, and the ending is also irregular. Next example. Nick hört in der Vorlesung gut zu. Obviously, it's a separable verb because we have the zu at the end of the sentence. Nick hat in der Vorlesung gut zugehört. Now we see the typical pattern for separable verbs. Yeah, zu is the separable prefix. Then we have the ge, then the verb root hör plus t. So it's completely regular, but it's separable. Okay. Verlierst du oft dein Handy? Hast du oft dein Handy verloren? Inseparable. Heute stehe ich zu spät auf. In the present perfect, it's heute bin ich zu spät aufgestanden. It's separable, and we use the sein because it's a verb of transition. Next example. Meine Eltern besuchen mich in Zürich. What's the solution? Meine Eltern haben mich in Zürich besucht. Besuchen is inseparable, and the prefix be is always inseparable. That's good to know. Next sentence. Übt ihr heute viel? Okay. Habt ihr heute viel geübt? Okay, just a simple verb and also a regular verb. Leandro fliegt nach Hongkong. Leandro ist nach Hongkong geflogen. It's a verb of motion. That's why we have sein as an auxiliary. Next sentence. Franziska sagt im Unterricht nichts. What's correct? Franziska hat im Unterricht nichts gesagt. It's just a regular simple verb. Viele Schüler fahren mit dem Bus. In present perfect, it's viele Schüler sind mit dem Bus gefahren. So it's a verb of motion, but it's a simple verb. Last example. Meine Freunde bringen Pizza mit. What's correct? Meine Freunde haben Pizza mitgebracht. Yeah, it's a separable verb and it's also a mixed verb because we have a regular ending but an irregular verb root. Well, the pizza is a great idea. I think you deserve it after this lesson with this hard topic, present perfect with regular, irregular, separable, and inseparable verbs. I hope you enjoyed it, and maybe you will enjoy a pizza right now.
If you want to continue learning German with me, please subscribe to my channel and click on one of the videos or playlists next to me. Thanks for watching and see you soon.